For the best aerospace era, this is Mansplaining. Here's the host, Anthony L. Seeley.
Welcome, aerospace enthusiasts. I thought this was a perfect time to clarify the main theme for the Mansplaining podcast. It is the theme that the time frame from 1903 to 1975 is the best aerospace era. You have all seen that meme of a guy sitting at a table holding a cup of coffee outside with a sign in front of his table. Well, that's me today, and the sign says 1903 to 1975 was the best aerospace era. Changed my mind. It's time to defend my argument. Now, where should I begin? For the record, the events that formed the best aerospace era, the beginning, the Wright brothers' first flight on December 17th, 1903, on the beaches of Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The end, the joint space mission between NASA and the Soviets, known as the Apollo-Soyuz Test Project. On this mission, the Soviets' Soyuz spacecraft rendezvoused and docked with an American Apollo spacecraft during the Cold War on July 17, 1975. Now, when I proclaim that this is the best aerospace era, most people are going to think that's because of the moon landings. And as of early 2026, when this episode airs, mankind has yet to go back to the moon. Although there are also those people who are going to say, we never went to the moon, and the earth is flat, and lizard people are running the government. Conspiracy theories can be interesting. One thing that becomes apparent when studying history is that every generation believes they are the pinnacle of human civilization. Some will say we have the best technology now, and superior crafts, and nothing 50 plus years ago compares to what we have today. We discovered this, we accomplished that. Some will mention the Airbus A380, the Falcon 9, or maybe the space shuttle as examples. You can't just say it was just because of the moon landings. My theme goes much further than just the moon landings, though. We accomplished many other achievements in the air and space that we have not matched or exceeded since the best aerospace era. We also engineered some truly remarkable crafts that we pushed faster and higher than ever before or since. You know that meme of Chris Jericho standing in the middle of the ring, holding a very long list. I'm actually old enough to remember watching that live. I have a list here for you. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about speed. We humans have always been obsessed with speed, haven't we? Would you believe that there is still a speed record that still officially stands from the 1930s? For this speed record, we have to go all the way to Italy. The airplane in question is a Mach-E MC-72. It is a sleek and awesome-looking seaplane. Only 5 Mach-E MC-72s were ever built. Now, between 1933 and 34, it set some world speed records. One of which was reaching a top speed of just over 440 miles per hour. This was achieved by pilot Francesco Angelo. This speed record by a seaplane over water apparently still stands today, almost 100 years later. Remember how long ago this was. This happened under the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. This even happened before Italy invaded northern countries in Africa at the beginning of World War II. There is a Mach-E displayed at the Italian Air Force Museum near Rome, Italy. I have not been to see this one, although I have been to Italy. Italy's awesome, by the way. You should go visit if you ever get the chance. Now, how about the speed record for any type of craft with wings? Now, most people are going to think about Chuck Yeager here. I will have some content about Chuck Yeager in the next series, so stand by for that. So when was the fastest official speed achieved by something with wings? First, we are going to need a ridiculously fast airplane, engineered for the job. A rocket plane, actually. The X-15. This is an awesome aircraft, although it cannot take off from a runway on the ground by itself. The X-15 was carried into the sky on the wing of another icon from the best aerospace era, a modified B-52. Honestly, how cool would that be, to ride along on the wing of a B-52 like this? After the B-52 reached an optimal elevation, the X-15 would be deployed and launched. If you have seen the movie First Man, this is what Neil Armstrong was flying in that first intense opening scene. Now, officially, I want to stress the word officially here. On October 3rd, 1967, pilot William Pete Knight pushed an X-15 to Mach 6.7. That's 4,520 miles per hour. The official speed record for a craft with wings. I can't wait to explore the X-15 program further. Has someone unofficially beat this record? Now you would think this record would have been broken by now. Think of all the awesome military airplanes we have today from China, Russia, the US. But we have to go with officially here, and according to some reliable sources, this was the fastest speed achieved. Either way, you can see an X-15 at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Now, the X-15 is not your conventional type of airplane, of course. That's a rocket plane. Now, as far as like a plane that could take off on its own and land like a conventional airplane, this next one is far from a conventional airplane, but possibly this one is the fastest of its kind. And it's a favorite for many aerospace enthusiasts. The SR-71 Blackbird. I cannot find a true top speed for the SR-71. The SR-71 definitely can achieve more than Mach 3. If you'd like to see one of those, there's one at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Virginia. Now to the world of the airlines, a world I'm familiar with because I've spent almost 2 decades in the business. How about some supersonic airliners? Both the Concorde and the Tupolev 144 were developed during the best aerospace era, a time when we engineered what was thought impossible. Both were developed during the best aerospace era and entered service afterwards, transporting passengers to destinations faster than ever before or since. The Tupolev 144 was short-lived. The Concorde here was no doubt the better airplane, and served for more than 2 decades. It had a feature called Super Cruise that enabled flight over Mach 2 without even using afterburners. How amazing is that? We don't have anything like that anymore. By the way, neither of these aircraft were the first purpose-built airliner to break the sound barrier, but that's a story for another time. If you would like to see a Concorde, there is one on display at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Virginia. Now, I have mentioned some truly awesome examples of aerospace engineering here, but now let's get to something really cool. How about a Cessna 172? Yes, you heard that right. A Cessna 172. This next one is not a speed record, as you might have guessed, but an endurance record. On December 4th, 1958, John Cook and Robert Tim took off from LAS Airport in Las Vegas, Nevada. They flew a modified Cessna 172 that was nicknamed the Hacienda. They flew around the desert for 64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds. A truck would drive below and refuel and resupply them when needed on this insanely long flight. As much as I love flying to travel, I would have hated to be in an airplane that long. I believe a casino actually sponsored them for this flight. If you would like to see this incredible Cessna 172, the Hacienda itself, it is on display at the LAS airport at the baggage claim area. Now back to the airline world. It is hard to grasp how much the airline business has changed the world. By the last few years of the best aerospace era, a person could walk into a commercial airport, big or small, and travel anywhere, possibly to the other side of the planet, in less than a week. And a ticket cost way less back then, just like everything else here today. And I want you to remember, the airlines are not just there to take you to Disney World on vacation. We're there for business trips. We're there if you get that phone call from a family member or a close friend who's in a crisis. We'll get you there faster. And also, before the best aerospace era, most people grew up, lived, and died in the same town that they were born in. With the airlines, you can pack a bag, get a ticket, fly to another city, and start all over somewhere else. Now, very early on in my airline career, I once saw an amazing sight. 3 legends of aviation parked next to each other on Concourse E, the international terminal of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, ATL. I saw a Boeing 747 in one gate. Next to it was a DC-10 in another. And beside that, a much smaller aircraft, a Boeing 737. If you think about it, all these airplanes do the same thing, but fly differently because the 747 has 4 engines, the DC-10 has 3, and the 737 has 2. We're losing this kind of variety when it comes to aircraft design. In the next decade or so, airliners will all more or less look the same. Now, the Airbus A380 is an amazing piece of aerospace engineering. I once saw one at the LAX airport. The A380 was developed decades after the first double-decker airliner, the 747. Will we ever see another like it? Or will we see any other bold or unprecedented airliner designs? I've also talked about, in general, how different the experience was to fly during the best aerospace era. Being a passenger on an airplane was an event. It was a matter of luxury. Passengers dressed up in nice clothes before flying, and they treated those making the flight possible with respect and admiration. From the pilots and flight attendants to the customer service agents and ramp agents. They also did not trash the gate areas or the airplanes themselves. Don't be that person. Speaking of experiences, I highly doubt this experience will ever make a comeback. Airlines used to operate flying boats. Flying airline boats like the Martin M130, the Boeing 314 Clipper, or the Sikorsky S40 were not uncommon in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Pan Am was probably the most famous for using Clippers at the time. Flying boats were not uncommon in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Think of them as yachts with wings. They could carry almost as many passengers as an Embraer 175. Imagine boarding a Boeing 314 Clipper in Baltimore then taking off from the cold inner harbor waters. Then, after the flight, landing in the clear, warm water near the coast of the Bahamas. You would basically be able to step right off the plane and onto the beach. That would be fantastic. At the time, there were not many established airports with runways and facilities, so flying boats made sense for the airlines back then. This changed by the late 1940s and 1950s. Flying boats lost out to conventional airplanes and later jets. This entire concept went away and most likely will never return, unfortunately. Speaking of flying boats, how about something big? Really big. The huge H-4 Hercules, better known as the Spruce Goose. This flying boat was colossal, and is still one of the largest aircraft to ever fly. Although it only flew one time in the waters off of Long Beach, California, on November 2nd, 1947. Howard Hughes actually flew it himself. Picture something in the realm of the same size as a Lockheed C-5 Galaxy, taking off and then splashing back down in the water. What an awesome sight that must have been to see. It was intended to serve the same role as a C-5 Galaxy during World War II. But the war was over by the time it was ready, and as I said before, flying boats lost out to conventional aircraft. It is still the largest flying boat ever made, and the largest airplane of any kind made of wood. The Hughes H-4 Hercules is on display at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in Oregon. I have not been to see this one, but it's on my list to go see. So flying boats did not stand the test of time, but you know what did? There are many iconic airplanes that were engineered during the best aerospace era that are still in use or are still in service today, if not recently retired. Here's a short list for you. The B-52, the C-130, the Antonov AN-12, the Boeing 737, the Boeing 747, the Tupolev Tu-95, the MiG-21, the MiG-25, the F-14, the F-15, the U-2 spy plane. There are even still some DC-3s being used today. Its first flight was more than 90 years ago. You don't need to go to a museum to see these awesome aviation legends of the sky. You just need to go to an airport or a military base. After this episode, go check your flight radar, or just go look up. They're out there. Although if you look up and see a squadron of Tu-95s, then you should run for shelter. We don't use TVs, phones, or radios from decades past, but we are still using airplanes that were originally engineered and operated in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's not just airplanes. Now for space. The Samyorka, or R-7 rocket, was developed in the 1950s and first successfully launched in 1957. It was the first ICBM capable of delivering a nuclear warhead to any target on Earth. Fortunately, it never did that. The Samyorka found a much more awesome job as a space launch vehicle. If you are familiar with the Mansplaining podcast, then you already know about this. Now, if you look at black and white photos or videos of this rocket from the 1950s and compare it to what the Russians are using right now, it's the same design language and engineering. Although they call this the Soyuz now, not to be confused with the Soyuz spacecraft, which was originally developed in the 1960s and is also still in use today. This is space-age technology, and it still works. Now here's a space first that has not been matched since the 1960s, and I do not see this being done anytime soon in the foreseeable future. A space mission like no other. Cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova was launched into orbit by a Semyorka rocket on June 16, 1963. Tereshkova was the first woman in space. Now you may be thinking, so what? Many women have been to space since then. Not like this, they haven't. This was a solo mission aboard a Vostok spacecraft. She orbited the Earth 48 times, and to this date is the only solo space mission in orbit performed by a woman. At the time, this mission was criticized as being just a propaganda stunt to enhance the USSR's agenda during the Cold War. I respect that assertion, but this mission did demonstrate something else, that a woman could handle space. This mission also proved something else. Tereshkova was not a pilot or an aerospace engineer or a member of the Soviet military. She was a factory worker and an amateur skydiver. This proved that one does not necessarily need to be cut from the same mold as Gus Grissom, John Young, or Alexei Leonov to fly in space. And remember, this mission occurred all the way back in 1963. That's a long time ago. I do not see this achievement being matched anytime soon. Wait, what was the last solo space mission in orbit? I bet it was... Stand by. Yes, I thought so. It was the Chinese. Yang Liwei, a taikonaut, orbited the Earth in a Shenzhou spacecraft in 2003. Now let's talk about really going into space. By that I mean leaving Earth's orbit entirely and venturing out into the void beyond. On December 21st, 1968, William Anders, Frank Borman, and Jim Lovell were launched from Earth aboard a Saturn V. This was Apollo 8. Their mission was to travel to the moon and make it back in one piece. The mission was not to land on the moon, however. Come on, we're talking about 60 years ago. Now I know the Artemis program is scheduled to change that this year. In fact, very soon, which is why I aired this episode now. I pray that they are successful. Now most likely we are going to walk on the moon again within the next decade. Let's not forget, whoever does step on the lunar surface again next will be walking in the footsteps of these men. Harrison Schmitt, Eugene Cernan, Charles Duke, John Young, James Irwin, Dave Scott, Edgar Mitchell, Alan Shepard, Alan Bean, Pete Comrade, Buzz Aldrin, and of course, Neil Armstrong. And they did it more than 50 plus years ago. And they did it without smartphones, AI, or the internet. I actually flew down to Florida and tried to watch the first launch of Artemis I. However, the launch was scrubbed and rescheduled, so I did not get to see that one. I do recommend that everyone listening try at least once to go see a space launch. There are plenty of areas around Cape Canaveral where you can view the launch pad from a distance. There is an app called Space Launch Schedule that I highly recommend. Just don't forget your binoculars. This is definitely an underrated American pastime. And while you're there, don't forget to check out the Kennedy Space Center. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I said that my statement means more than just the moon landings. Let's take the Apollo missions out of the equation entirely. At the time of this episode premiering in early 2026, we have yet to venture out from low Earth orbit. So when was the second furthest distance achieved by a manned spacecraft? We have to go back to the mid-1960s again. The second furthest distance obtained by a manned spacecraft was on Gemini 11 in 1964 by Richard Gordon and Pete Comrade. I'm a big fan of the Gemini spacecraft, and it's too bad the Gemini program could not have continued on in some form or fashion beyond the 1960s. So as you can see, it's not just about the moon landings. Now to war. Some of the biggest aerial battles in history took place during the best aerospace era. For example, like the St. Mihiel air battle, the Battle of Britain, the Battle of Kursk, or the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Now, dogfights are exciting. Imagine fighters and bombers flying in all directions in a maelstrom of action, trying to gain an optimal position for a kill, or for a bombing or strafing run. I cover air battles here, even though I would not label the Mansplaining podcast a war stories podcast. But world conflicts played a major part in the best aerospace era. I do love reading about and profiling accounts from the skies of the Great War and World War II, as I have before in earlier episodes. I will profile other air conflicts like the Korean War and Vietnam in the future, so stand by for that if you do enjoy this kind of content. Honestly though, war is terrible, and I want this one to stay behind. We don't need to top these air conflicts in the future. No one really wants World War III, right? I can and will make multiple episodes on the topics we have talked about here today. But I know your time is valuable, and I want to get to the real reason why 1903 to 1975 was the best aerospace era. It's not an airplane or a rocket. It's not because of aerospace achievements. It was the spirit, the essence, and determination we had to push the envelope for what was possible. This is it. During this era, we first made something heavier than air fly. Then we made it fast. Then we made it safe. Then we made it bigger and fly higher. We also made it into a devastating weapon of war. Speaking of weapons, we developed rockets capable of delivering hydrogen warheads to our adversaries anywhere in the world. But instead, we discovered a much more awesome use for these rockets. We repurposed these rockets to launch satellites, probes, and humans into orbit and further out into space. And the benefits of the space programs and the benefits of the airlines, as I mentioned before, are apparent and paramount to our existence today. Do you think we peaked as a civilization during the best aerospace era as far as aerospace is concerned? Have we just settled since then? Have we just settled in the wake of these achievements that I've mentioned before? Are we too busy staring at our phones and arguing about politics or fighting petty wars to advance ourselves further? I didn't expect this episode to get that deep, but it went there. What do you think? Try and change my mind. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, there is always a light at the end of the runway.
Follow Mansplaining for more stories from the best aerospace era, or go to bestaerospaceera.com or find us on social media.